Your goal by the end of the period today is to engage in a close reading of the last 3 paragraphs of Obama's speech. A close reading is a careful and purposeful rereading of a text. Today you're going to reread this text 4 times. Each time you're going to mark something different in the text, and I encourage you to use that close reading guide and especially those guiding questions as you work through each of the 4 readings. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to model each of the 4 readings with this first paragraph, and then you will pause the video and go back and you'll mimic what we did together with the second and with the third paragraph. Okay, let's get started. So the goal of the first reading is to begin to create an image in your mind, to get a feel for language and tone. The first reading is all about your initial reaction. I'm going to use guiding questions like, on the surface, what is the text mostly about? What does it sound like? What's the author's tone? And what images immediately come to mind? So let's get started reading. That is why we came to Hiroshima. That is why we come to Hiroshima, so that we might think of the people we love, the first smile from our children in the morning, the gentle touch from a spouse over the kitchen table, the comforting embrace of a parent. We can think of those things and know that those same precious moments took place here 71 years ago. So on the surface, what is the text mostly about? Well, it's all about families, right? And these tender moments with loved ones. What does it sound like? So one of the sounds that I get, and I think this gives me a glimpse at his tone as well, as these images of the first smile, even the image of mourning, the gentle touch, right? The fact that he uses the adjective gentle, the comforting embrace. So I'm thinking that the tone and the sound of it is pretty lighthearted. It's really intimate. Maybe even sweet would be a word I could use to describe it. And then what are the images that are starting to come to my mind? So the images that really pop up right away for me that have my first reaction is I am starting to think about these families. So I'm thinking about that child, that smile of that child, and kind of like a giggling child. I'm thinking of these lovers or these spouses sitting over the kitchen table and having this romantic moment. I'm thinking of the embrace of a parent, that comforting embrace. And one of the images that I immediately start to have, especially with this last line, I think is really important. We can think of those things and know that those same precious moments took place here 71 years ago. So I'm starting to think about the families and the moments they had together on the morning that the bomb was dropped. So I'm going to ask you right now to pause the video, and you are going to go and you're going to mimic what we just did here in that second and that third paragraph. If you haven't already, because I didn't say this, if you haven't already marked what we marked together with the first paragraph, I'm going to ask you to do that, and then to go and to work through the second and the third paragraph. Okay, hopefully at this point you have marked up your second and third paragraph with using the guiding reading questions for the first reading. So our goal for our second reading is to start to dig into what the text is saying. We're summarizing the key details and understandings of each paragraph. And we're going to use guiding questions, and these I might not do in order, but these guiding questions are going to help us start to think about what is the text starting to be about, and what are those really important details. So what are the most important details in the paragraph? What are the inferences that I need in understanding the text? What does the author really mean when he or she says? So let's read it a second time. That is why we come to Hiroshima, so that we might think of the people we love. The first smile from our children in the morning, the gentle touch from a spouse over the kitchen table, the comforting embrace of a parent. We can think of those things and know that those same precious moments took place here 71 years ago. So what are the most important details in this paragraph? So I think one of the really important ones is that I, as a reader, am supposed to think of the people that I love. And then he gives me some images, and then also that I need to think of those same moments that the people of Hiroshima experienced on the morning that the bomb was dropped. So I'm going to write that. So one of the key details is that I, as a reader, Obama wants me to think about my family and the families we'll say of Hiroshima. He wants me to think of those moments that they experienced that morning. And one of the arguments that I'm starting to see him making, or one of the statements that I'm starting to see him make, is that really these moments, or these sweet moments, are experienced by everyone, right? That our enemies also have families and loved ones. So as I'm reading, that's one of the things that I'm starting to see pop up for me in the text. I'm also starting to see him start to make some arguments about humanity and what makes us human, and the idea that, like, what makes us human is these connections, these sweet moments that we have with loved ones, the fact that we have these connections that is shared between humans all over the world. So right now I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and I'm going to ask for you to go and to engage in your second reading of the second and third paragraphs of of the excerpt you're looking at right now. Okay, at this point, you have hopefully marked in the text those key details. You've summarized what each paragraph is mostly about, or those key understandings in each paragraph. So let's look at our third reading. So the goal of our third reading is really to look at the larger argument. What is his big picture argument in the text? So I'm going to use guiding questions like, what's the author's argument? What's the main idea or theme? And then what's the author's purpose? This is why we come to Hiroshima, so that we might think of the people we love. The first smile from our children in the morning, the gentle touch from a spouse over the kitchen table, the comforting embrace of a parent. We can think of those things and know that those same precious moments took place here 71 years ago. So the big picture argument that is starting to pop up, I think, or I'm starting to understand, is that we as humans need to remember what unites us, especially in war, or during war. Each of us has families and loved ones. So when we make a decision, I might make this a separate bullet or mark this somewhere else because it really is a bigger argument. Each of us has loved ones, so when we make a decision to act or to harm in war, that we are harming people who have loved ones and who experienced those sweet moments each day with their families. I'm also starting to see that one of his big arguments is that we need to see each other and are, or maybe even like we need to see each other as human beings. Because I think it's important that he's calling us, and maybe this is a part of his author's purpose, is he's calling us as readers to think about the other, right? To think about our enemies as people like us. So I'm going to ask for you right now to pause the video and to go and to mark the larger arguments that you start to see developed in the second and the third paragraph. You may not write as much as I did with that first paragraph, but you should see some other arguments that he's starting to make and some other purposes that he has for the text. So at this point, you at least need to have 2 or 3 of his larger arguments written somewhere on your page. Let's work through the fourth reading. The fourth reading, I think, is the most fun. This is where we begin to analyze and evaluate author's choice and craft, so the decisions that he's making as a writer, that we understand how the text fits within the historical context. And we're going to use guiding questions like, why did the author do this? Why did the author list? Why did the author use this type of language? What is the intended effect that it has on the reader or listener? How is the text a response to the historical context? And how does the text add or change the story of Hiroshima? That is why we come to Hiroshima, so that we might think of the people we love. The first smile from our children in the morning, the gentle touch from a spouse over the kitchen table, the comforting embrace of a parent. We can think of those things and know that those same precious moments took place here 71 years ago. So some of the things that I see him doing, the first thing that I think is really powerful is that he's using these images. The first smile, the gentle touch, the comforting embrace. And I think that these images, for me, he uses images that make the reader think or imagine their families. Or even, maybe imagine or even remember their families. And they're like really strong pictures. And they also, I think he's using them to make me feel empathy or compassion for the Japanese killed in Hiroshima or hurt. So a couple of the other things that I see him doing, so I think that he's connecting, one of the things that I like is he's connecting these first 2 lines. So he asks me to think of the people that I love, and then he asks me to think of those that were hurt or that were present even on the morning that Hiroshima fell. So I think he's connecting my thoughts of the reader's family to the families of those in Hiroshima. And I think that again gives us or creates empathy in the reader or the listener. So how is the text a response to the historical context? So one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading this was how different this is than some of the other language and arguments that I hear from other politicians, specifically Donald Trump. And I know that's something that you guys are really excited to talk about is Donald Trump. But the idea that like in his language and in other politicians' language right now that we hear kind of this argument that the enemy is not human, and I'm going to write that. So in language today, we hear arguments that the enemy is not human, or the enemy isn't the same as us. And I think that Obama is responding to that and reminding us how similar we are. So that's one of the ways that I think he really is responding to our situation today. Is he really, there is kind of this, especially with conversations about ISIS or about Muslims. I think that we have this hateful language that's happening right now in American political conversations or American culture, and I think that Obama is asking us to get rid of that, to recognize how similar we are, recognize that we are all human and have loved ones. Sorry, again, I'm writing too much. You don't have to write all of this down. Write down what is useful for you. Okay, right now I'm going to ask for you to pause the video and to go and to engage in this third reading. I think this is a really fun reading and is a great way for you to start to think about what is Obama doing, that some of those moves that Obama's making that you might try on when you actually write your own speech for our debate later this semester. Okay, enjoy.